Welcome to our new series at Energy Connects, Scope 3 in Focus. I'm delighted for our first episode that we're going to have a focus on supply chain in relation to Scope 3, and really happy to have an industry leader within the supply chain industry, Kris Vedat, Head of Technology and Logistics at P&O Maritime Logistics, and sitting alongside him is Morgan Eldred, co-founder of Digital Energy. Thank you both for joining me today for our first episode.
Thank you, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, Kris, I want to start with you. Can you tell me a little bit more about what P&O Maritime Logistics is doing to reduce their emissions?
Absolutely. So P&O Maritime Logistics is a global leader in logistics and maritime services. And as the supply chain contributes sizable to the emissions around the world, we feel it's our responsibility to try and do what we can to try and reduce that. So we do have several initiatives in place to try and combat the emissions. So a couple of examples is on our vessels. So one of our vessels, the Hannah Christina, operates on LNG fuel now, which is a far more efficient fuel method. We've also started looking at some of our fleet that we have. So we had a fleet of module carrying vessels called the MCVs, and we're now trying to reutilise these vessels within our operations. And one thing we've done recently is converted one of the MCVs into a cable lane vessel, but we've actually approached this with sustainability in mind, and we've used hybrid technology on board the vessel. So now we have a hybrid propulsion unit, so using a combination of battery and methanol, which is a new method or a new approach to having far cleaner propulsion on board.
That's impressive. And I just want to get your viewpoints on, and what efforts are you making around, Scope 3 reduction, or looking at or starting to work on? So
I think in our industry today, the emissions responsibility is far more reliant on the client, the IOCs, the NOCs of this world. What we're trying to do at P&O is trying to change that model and move it to a more service-based model. So we're now saying that we want to move logistics to a service-based logistics model, which means that the responsibility then lies with us as the operator. In that mind, then we can start looking at trying to optimize our vessels. So we start looking at the cargo delivery, trying to optimize the cargo delivery by using AI technology to try and look at the schedules, the holistic distribution of cargo, taking into consideration telemetric data to try and really optimize the vessel movement and the vessel cargo distribution. And in that area, we work with partners, notably Digital Energy in this instance, to try and help us with that, to try and have the most optimized solution.
It's really interesting here. And Morgan, I want to bring you in here. Obviously, as Kris said, working with you as one of their digital partners, but I want to hear more about that and how, again, data and analytics can play a part here in the emissions measurement.
Oh, absolutely perfect. So, what we're able to do through an approach of tracking, tracing, and then optimizing the resources, so that's the cargo that comes in, it's the emissions on board the fuel. We're able to put that together, model it, and do something that's quite unique. So rather than taking just a route optimization, we take a fleet optimization based upon the demand, and we put forward a truly optimized schedule where it's you can almost think about the scheduling rather than coming from the humans is now being done at a more analytical approach, systematic, where AI is scheduling that, and we've found in some of the case studies that we've published reductions of 60%, and from 20% to 60%. There's significant reduction of real emissions through the use of digital technology.
And so to add on to that, I think historically the industry's been very siloed in its approach of the supply chain. So you have the last mile that sits there, then you have the shore-based operations, and you have the inbound cargo. What we're trying to do now is break down those silos to have a far more transparent view of that, so we can truly optimize the end-to-end supply chain, which then reduces the emissions that are emitted from that.
Yeah, and I think what could be clear here is this could have a real impact on actually reducing the emissions if you're taken out of the silo situation that's in now. Do you think what your kind of change could really have an impact then on reducing emissions?
I think it can, because I think there's a lot of discussions about new energy formats, and but we need to be tangible on what we can actually do. And I think what we're looking at now when we're using sort of technology, AI, to try and optimize, that's tangible and it's agnostic as well. So it doesn't matter if the vessel has a hybrid fuel system or it's using methanol, but we're trying to look at what we can do today to try and reduce the emissions. And then using this technology, looking at route optimization, schedule optimization, this is a real benefit that can be done today.
Yeah, and I want to bring you in here, Morgan. Technology, it really can be an enabler, or if you tied in with collaboration on reducing Scope 3 emissions.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the first thing is we have to track it. So we have to know what the emissions are. Then we need to trace it. And that means doing performance management and benchmarking it. Then when we can see what the prize is, then of course we can use technology that's out there, right? Artificial intelligence, to really then optimize it and optimize those processes in a way where it's really fit for purpose. So it's then around, integrating the planning across the operator, the supply chain, and even the wider value chain. And then by doing that, you're creating this ecosystem where people are working together, organizations are working together, but now we're making real tangible differences that we've measured. Right? So we've measured it, we've recorded, we verified it, and then we've optimized it.
Yeah, and I think obviously, Kris, your role as head of technology, you can see this, but I want to get your viewpoints of how do you balance the role of technology management and support of innovation in the industry?
That's a really good question. So I think modern IT or modern technology functions have had to spin on their head. So when you had sort of the 80-20 split, which is 80% keeping the lights on, 20% innovation, in our mind, in P&O, we've turned that and it's 80% innovation, 20% keeping the lights on. And I think we are certainly seen as a business enabling tool to the industry or to the company. We have dedicated teams that we have in place to sort of innovate, to work on new solutions, to sort of try and find the problems in the industry and find a solution to them. It's also important that we find the right partners to help us in that area, because obviously we're aware we can't do everything ourselves. And that's why in this instance, technology and logistics is formed as one function, because we believe that the enabling of technology enables the service of logistics. So as the head of both of those functions, it's my job to ensure that there's a sustainable business model and a service that's in place, but the technologies and the tools that are enabling that are fit for purpose and the right tools and the right services for that task.
Yeah, and I know when we spoke a couple of weeks ago for the launch of this series, Morgan, we talked about collaboration, and obviously we're here for our first episode, but this is a true example then of digital collaboration and working towards knowing what the emissions are, using data and sort of reducing.
Absolutely. And, this is really just the tip of the iceberg where it can go further. So how can we get, people in the last mile? How can we get the different energy producers? How can we get the different material producers? How can we get all of them to start working together? So, everyone used to talk about the Uber business model, right? And if you look at it, in the industry, in the energy industry, everyone's been like, what is that? If you look in the case of P&O, well, this is an absolute example of where they've gone from leasing a vessel to providing a service and taking those emissions on themselves. And then because they're at scale, being able to truly optimize that and then giving the data back and collecting the data. So this is really the tip of the iceberg of how we can make really transformational changes within the industry.
That's really interesting to hear, Morgan. And Kris, just get you here as well. I mean, got the rest of 2023 coming up, COP28 coming up, but I mean, it sounds like you at P&O, switched the head of being focused on innovation. So technology is really going to be a key driver and enabler for you.
Yeah, and I think it's always been part of our key core strategy as a company. We saw some time ago that we needed to start these changes and using technology in order to do this as well. And we've just seen that the industry has been very static and, dare I say, archaic. I've been in the marine industry for all of my career. It is a traditional industry, and when we've been trying to change the mindset, that's been challenging. But with the transparency that we can provide and we can show the data, those discussions, those arguments are far easier to break down because people are now beginning to trust the information that we're providing and the transparency that we provide as well.
Kris, you've talked about a lot of what you've been doing in the reducing emissions area and all the technology and investment that you've been doing at P&O Maritime Logistics. Can you also just say, not why, but what's your vision behind it and what sort of motivated you to do it?
I think the vision behind it is that we wanted to change how the operating model works today. We saw that the continuous charter model wasn't a sustainable model. It also didn't put a lot of responsibility on us as operators to do our part for sustainability, because that responsibility and accountability sat with our clients. So we saw the opportunity that if we could then take that responsibility onto us, we could then, as operators, be in a far better position to optimize and reduce the emissions, which is very good business for everyone. So that's why we saw this vision. We saw this need to invest into these services and into this technology in order to also differentiate ourselves from the market. So if you look at the market, our industry today, it's quite static, it's quite stuck in its ways. We wanted to differentiate, and we saw this as a key differentiator to our competitors.
Thank you both for joining me for this first episode in our new Energy Connect series, Scope 3 in Focus. And I look forward to bringing more voices within the industry to look at this important issue of Scope 3 in the coming months on Energy Connects.